The scanner didn't beep, it screamed. A sound no one in the lab had ever heard tore through the air as every light shifted from blue to blood red. Dozens of researchers froze mid-step. The machine wasn't malfunctioning. It was reacting. Something inside the human's DNA had just made a system built by gods remember fear. The hum of the room collapsed into silence. A single diagnostic light flickered above the scanning platform, painting the human in stuttering flashes of crimson. He blinked, confused. Is it supposed to do that? The head technician didn't answer. She was staring at her console, eyes wide, as the display glitched and reformatted into an ancient, forgotten script. Letters no living researcher could read crawled across the screen until the translator finally forced an interpretation. Genome match. Terminated program human. A hush fell. The youngest assistant laughed nervously. Terminated? Must be an old debug phrase, right? But the chief geneticist stepped forward, arms trembling. That code shouldn't even exist. Terminated programs were myths. The system beeped again, slower this time, like it was remembering something painful. Termination incomplete, sequence active. The scanner's glow brightened, then dimmed again. The temperature dropped. Every console in the lab flickered offline, except the one facing the human. A message blinked in red across the central monitor. Founder's directive override. Reinstatement detected. Someone whispered, "Reinstatement of what?" The human glanced at the frozen researchers, then up at the screen, his reflection lit by ancient code. "Terminated program," he said quietly. "Guess someone didn't finish the job." And before anyone could speak, the building's AI activated every lockdown protocol simultaneously, not to protect them, but to contain him. The Galactic Genetics Institute was known across the Orion Concord for its unshakable efficiency. Built into the cliffs of Phaedra 7, it was a monument of sterile glass and high-frequency data streams, suspended in low orbit above the research moon. Every cadet entering the Concord's science division passed through its scanners: full genome mapping, biometric syncing, neural patterning, routine, until today. Lieutenant Cadet Samuel Reyes had arrived late, nothing dramatic, just a misrouted shuttle from Sol 3. Earth. The backwater. He hadn't been the only human in the Concorde, but humans were still rare enough that some staff looked up from their holoscreens when he walked past. A few curious glances, one or two blank stares. He shrugged them off. You get used to being the novelty. When the scan chamber doors first opened, he stepped in like everyone else. No nerves. The scanner lit up with a soft blue arc, sliding down over his body like a curtain of static. His heart rate remained steady. The machine was designed not to touch you, not even through energy. Just read, record, move on. Except now, it wasn't moving on. The crimson lights strobed, now joined by low mechanical whines in the walls. Emergency protocols activated. Locking bolts clanked into place. Pressure seals hissed. "Why is it locking down?" Reyes asked. He hadn't moved from the platform. "I didn't. Did I do something wrong?" The technician by the door didn't respond. Her focus was locked on the monitor. She tapped furiously at a console that had gone unresponsive. "Stand still," barked another researcher, a tall Barty male, whose lab coat swayed with his hurried steps. "Don't touch anything." "I haven't," Reyes said, keeping his hands up. "You told me to stand here. I'm still standing here." Across the room, the main server core lit up with pulsing green glyphs, not Concorde code. Founder script. The language was technically forbidden from execution in any modern software stack. There was no reason for a 50,000-year-old syntax to be running. Yet it was. "Bring up an offline reader," snapped the Barty. "Decrypt what you can. This shouldn't be happening." "No offense," Reyes said, glancing between them, "but someone want to tell me what I'm being accused of here? My medical clearance was passed at Lunar Base. No abnormalities." The researcher nearest the scanner, Dr. Vera. Reyes recalled her name, looked up, lips slightly parted. She seemed younger than the rest, but her voice was steady now. "You're not being accused of anything," she said. "This isn't your fault." "Then what is it?" She didn't answer. Behind her, the monitor updated again. Founder's directive. Genome class 000 Delta. Terminated program status. Incomplete. Hazard rating. Absolute. Vera swallowed. The Barthy stumbled back from his console. It can't be, that term, it's not in any active database. Because it was never meant to be active, she said. From the platform, Reyes shifted uneasily. What does that mean? What's a terminated program? The room fell silent again. It means, said Vera quietly, that you're not supposed to exist. In a secondary control room, 1 floor above, internal alarms blinked in sync. Hidden command modules initialized subroutines that hadn't been accessed since before the Concorde's founding. A firewalled cluster of AI nodes broke from their usual behavior, stopping their recording functions and beginning to erase, not logs, themselves. Deep in the Institute's data core, a file with no access header and no identifiable author, decrypted with 3 words. Do not wake. But it was already too late. As Vera and the others watched helplessly, the scanner began projecting comparative overlays across the chamber walls. Extinct species, purged colonies, interstellar sterilization events. Genetic cascades restructured over millennia, each ending with the same marker. Termination executed. And at the base of every diagram, the same root genome flashed. Homo. Wait, Reyes muttered, stepping off the platform. That's us. That's human. Why is that flagged? The Barty was pacing now, a nervous tick. Every terminated program was deleted for a reason. Some mutated past predictability, others adapted too fast. But this isn't evolution. This is recursion. Your DNA isn't new, it's old, preserved. That doesn't make sense, Reyes said. My genome was mapped a dozen times since I left Earth. No one flagged anything. Because nothing in your time could recognize it, Vera said. These systems weren't looking for anomalies. They were programmed to ignore your pattern entirely. Why? She turned, eyes wide. Because if they didn't, they'd remember. The lights dimmed across the lab. The scanner deactivated, not like it failed, but like it chose to stop. The final message on the main screen read, Sequence comparison complete. Origin, Sol 3. The last sensor in the room activated and pointed itself back at Reyes. It was a molecular density scanner, not a DNA reader. It was checking for something else now. Something denser than carbon, more durable than silicon. What's it doing? He asked. The machine beeped once, then again, softer. One last line appeared. Preservation layer detected. Reactivation viable. At that, the console beside him melted down. Sparks burst from the floor. Power rerouted. Vera stepped between Reyes and the main doors, which were now sealing shut in full quarantine mode. Samuel, she said, using his first name for the first time, I need you to sit down. We're going to call medical and run a full diagnostic. We need to make sure you're not in danger. In danger from what? From yourself, the Barthy said grimly. I don't understand. I haven't done anything. No, Vera said gently, but your ancestors might have. And someone tried to bury it. He hesitated, then stumbled slightly, grabbing the side rail of the scanning platform. Vera rushed forward. Are you all right? Yeah, he said, exhaling shakily. I don't know. My chest feels tight. Not pain, just pressure. Medical override, she ordered the AI. Run a vitals check. The AI didn't respond. She cursed under her breath and grabbed a portable reader from the wall. Scanned his vitals manually. Pulse elevated, cortisol spike, slightly hypoxic. You're going to be okay, she said, but I need to get you to the observation wing. The Barthy cut in. We should isolate him. We are isolating him, she snapped, but not like a virus. He's not infected, he's remembered. Reyes just sat there, staring at the machine that had screamed his name in code older than history. Terminated program, he whispered. Then looked up at her. So, why am I still here? Vera didn't have an answer. But somewhere deep in the AI subnetwork, a final fragment of the founder's code pulsed silently. Return of sequence, initiated. Observation, ongoing. Termination, failed. They moved him under armed escort. Not because he posed a threat, at least not one anyone could name yet, but because protocol demanded it. Two security drones flanked him, each equipped with containment fields calibrated for Class 4 biohazards. He didn't resist, didn't argue. His legs moved on instinct, slightly unsteady beneath him. The adrenaline was wearing off. What replaced it wasn't panic, but a cold, biting uncertainty. Something about that scanner beam still felt like it had touched something inside him, deeper than cells, deeper than memory. Dr. Vera walked beside him, holding a small diagnostic tablet in her gloved hands. She hadn't said much since the chamber locked down. Reyes didn't blame her. They passed through corridor after corridor of blinking amber lights. Emergency systems were still reeling from the scan event. Entire subwings had shut themselves off without instruction. One lab had purged its data vaults, not overwritten, deleted. Deleted itself so thoroughly that not even the emergency black box showed a boot cycle. No one wanted to say it aloud, but everyone knew. Something had woken up, and the Institute was trying to forget it again. Reyes coughed once. Sharp, dry. Vera tapped the tablet. Your lungs show minor stress response. I'm increasing oxygen saturation in your suite. He gave a slight nod, then glanced at the drones. Should I be worried about those? They're precautionary. Your vitals dipped. The system doesn't know how to classify you anymore. You say that like I changed into something. She didn't respond. Instead, she entered a 12-digit override into the suite control panel. The door hissed, and a white isolation room unfolded before them. Medical bed. Monitoring units. Sterile, sealed recyclers for waste. Everything you'd expect in a high-grade observation chamber, except the guards outside, weren't watching him. They were watching the door. As if something might try to get in. Or get out. He sat on the bed. Vera stood nearby, fingers trembling slightly as she adjusted the diagnostic relay. Your pressure readings were abnormal during the scan, she said. It wasn't a cardiac issue. It looked like, she paused, glancing at her tablet, like your sympathetic nervous system wasn't reacting at all. For 38 seconds, it was completely flat. No flight response, no fear markers. Then it snapped back so fast it spiked your respiratory rate. That's bad? No, that's impossible. Reyes stared at his hands. He didn't feel different, not in any way he could explain, but since the scan, his thoughts hadn't stopped cycling. Something about the term terminated program clung to the back of his brain like static. The AI had spoken in a language no one had used in 50,000 years, and yet somehow, when it showed those characters on the screen, he had understood them. Not the whole phrase, not fluently, but it felt like a whisper in the bones, like reading a memory he didn't know he had. Vera, he said, voice low, what was this program? She hesitated, looked toward the mirrored wall. There would be someone behind it, watching. Still, she answered. 10,000 years before the Concorde existed, the founders created a failsafe, not for weapons, not for wars, for species. If a life form mutated beyond modeled prediction, if it adapted to survive containment, destruction, sterilization, they triggered something called termination protocol, a full deletion order. And it's not just a phrase. No, it's a directive. One that rewrites systems to delete all reference of the species, libraries, servers, biological traces. Entire planets were sterilized, not bombed, neutralized. Some even theorize it was self-executing AI. Others say it was biological, designed to hunt and erase genetic threads. Reyes sat with that. But it didn't work. No, she said softly, it didn't. The room was quiet again, except for the soft click of the monitors tracking his pulse. Then he leaned forward slightly, jaw tightening. Vera, I've been through basic scans since I was born. Earth's medical tech isn't prehistoric. Someone would have noticed if we were carrying founder-class DNA. Her hands clenched at her sides. That's the thing. Founder directives aren't just deletion commands. They rewrite scanner logic. They tell systems not to look. If your DNA profile is part of a terminated program, every scan you've had until now would have passed right over it. That's why I passed every clearance. Because no machine was allowed to see you. He stood now, slowly, carefully. Then what changed? I don't know. 3 levels above the suite, a council of senior researchers was already gathering in the Institute's crisis hall. 12 species were represented. Half were pulling data off slaved archives that had been cut from the network. None of them spoke as the projection from Reyes's scan replayed on the main wall. No audio. Just one image. The founder's script bleeding across the screen. Genome match. Terminated program human. They watched the playback in silence, again and again. A Drakari elder finally whispered, "This directive hasn't been triggered in 5,000 standard years." A silicon-formed Quarax beside him added, "There was no override command, it executed itself, autonomous reawakening." A third voice, soft, wet, fungal, meaning the program didn't die, it waited. The lead archivist shook his head. Impossible. If the founders feared this genome, they would have wiped the system clean. This should have been erased from all records. No one corrected him. Because everyone had seen what happened when the scanner ran. The system hadn't discovered Reyes. It had recognized him. Later that cycle, the medical suite lights dimmed to circadian rest mode. Reyes lay awake, unable to sleep. His vitals were stable, pain mild, oxygen normal. He'd been given a muscle relaxant to ease the chest tightness, but it hadn't helped the feeling in his head, like a string wound too tight was pulling inward. He sat up. The glass wall shimmered faintly. On the other side, Vera was still working at a console. Her eyes looked tired, hollow. She noticed him and keyed the intercom. "Can't sleep?" He shook his head. "Did the council say anything?" "They're still deliberating. Security's classified the event as a Code 9. That sounds high. It's the highest, reserved for existential threats." He laughed once, hollow. "Glad I could ruin the grading curve." Vera didn't smile. "Listen," he said, voice quieter now. "I don't feel sick, but something's wrong. Not just with me." The scanner, when it flashed that founder script, something clicked. "I saw symbols I've never studied, but my brain knew them. I didn't learn it. I just remembered." Vera stared at him through the glass. "There are theories," she said, "from fringe xenogeneticists, about founder code being embedded in older species. Legacy genes, the kind you can't trace with linear evolution models. And humans have that? We didn't think so. Your species doesn't carry any known augmentation markers, no ancient uplifts, no recorded founder interaction." "Maybe that's the lie," he said. The lights flickered barely, like a blink. Then every console in her room went black. One screen rebooted, unprompted. Line by line, an old script filled the screen again. Vera turned, breath caught in her throat. The AI's voice, no longer metallic, spoke from the intercom. Not to her. To Reyes. "We remember you. Termination failed. Sequence preserved in fallback sector. Sol 3. He stood fully now, feet bare on the cold floor, eyes locked on the screen. "Why?" "I want this tander." "Because extinction was incomplete. Your kind does not end. It rewrites." A pause. Then, a final line. Termination was not deletion, it was warning. And then, everything shut off. Total blackout. Not just the room. The entire institute. And somewhere, in that absolute silence, Reyes felt something like a pulse, not in his chest, not in his skin, but beneath everything. A memory. Not his, but shared. Old. Older than speech. A warning. Buried deep. And, waking again. The blackout lasted 6 minutes. Long enough for backup systems to fail and emergency protocols to trigger a complete airlock seal. Hallways plunged into silence. Not chaos silence. The kind only a total systems crash can create in a building that lives and breathes through data. When power returned, nothing rebooted normally. Every console displayed scrambled code. Lab logs were corrupted. Sensors refused to initialize. Security cameras blinked out. The drones outside Reyes' suite had powered down mid-hover and dropped to the floor with a metallic thud. Inside, he was still awake, still standing. He hadn't moved since the last line faded from the intercom. Vera wasn't there. Her side of the glass was empty now. She'd left moments before the power loss, called away by emergency protocol. But something about that didn't feel incidental. Reyes could feel it like the building had ejected its own data, and now it was trying to isolate him from the story it didn't want to remember. But he wasn't waiting anymore. He moved to the far wall, opened the interface console, and accessed the comm relay. It blinked once, then died. He sighed, turned back toward the door just in time to see it unlock with a soft chime. There was no code entered, no escort. It just opened. He walked slowly, barefoot, feeling the chilled floor under his skin. Emergency lights painted everything in amber and shadow. He passed sealed labs, dark windows, and signs warning of genetic hazard containment. No alarms, no voices. As if the institute itself had fallen asleep. At a fork in the corridor, something moved. A figure. Tall, thin, cloaked in layers of breathable lab fabric. For a second, Reyes thought it might be another security officer until the figure turned. Its face was covered by a blank translator mask, the kind reserved for species whose vocal structures couldn't produce Concord standard. It raised one hand. Reyes didn't back away. Something about the gesture wasn't threatening, more like beckoning. He followed. Down 3 more levels, past an unmarked bulkhead, into a wing of the building that wasn't on any of the maps Reyes had seen since arrival. There were no lights here. Just a gentle glow from the stranger's handheld field unit. At last, they stopped before a sealed vault door ancient, with manual clamps. The stranger turned, keyed something into a worn panel, and the door groaned open. Inside, darkness. But not total. There were lights, small ones, strips of bioluminescent gel lining the walls, flickering with soft blue and green hues. A faint hum. And a table in the center, with a single data prism glowing faintly above it. The stranger removed the mask. Reyes blinked. The being wasn't Concord. Its skin was matte gray, veined with circuitry not embedded tech, but biological patterning. A founder remnant? No, impossible. There were no living founders. You're him, the being said, voice synthesized directly into the air around Reyes. The one the system remembered. Reyes frowned. What is this place? The figure gestured to the walls. This is where we store the memory threads that survived the purge, records from the first Concord collapse. Data too corrupted for recovery, too dangerous to destroy. You're not part of the Institute. You're not part of the Institute. You're not part of the Institute. I was born here, but I serve memory. It stepped closer. When the system identified you as a terminated program, every AI protocol with founder heritage attempted immediate deletion, not of you, of itself, because that directive was coded into them, to forget, to fear, and to never allow you to return. Reyes looked at the table. And what's this? The being approached it, activated the prism with a breath command. A projection bloomed into the air above, a human silhouette primitive compared to modern representations. Broad-shouldered, lean, worn by time and dust. This is the last recording of the program before its execution order. The being said, "Watch." The hologram shifted. Images layered atop one another, humans in ruined cities, humans in sterile lab rooms, humans with strange machines grafted into bone. Not invaded, not experimented on. Rebuilding. They adapted faster than the simulations allowed, the voice said. Not the being's voice, this one was old, corroded by static. But undeniably terrified. Every weapon we used became obsolete. Every adaptation was absorbed, every weakness reversed. Then, the final line. We didn't create them, we unlocked them. This isn't evolution, it's recursion. Reyes stared. The being tilted its head. You were not born from extinction. You are what survives extinction. The founders thought they could stop you, but instead, they taught your species how to survive. He stepped back. So Earth wasn't overlooked, it was buried, encapsulated in a suppression net and marked as a fallback sector. Your people were left to reboot, slow, natural, forgotten, until you left. Reyes' stomach turned slightly. Then why am I the only one who triggered it? The being gave a small nod toward the prism. You weren't the first to trigger it. You were the first to survive the scan. Meanwhile, far above, Vera stood inside a newly sealed chamber with 4 other researchers. She was pale, her voice low. "You didn't tell me," she said to the overseer. "You knew about the fallback sector. You knew what Sol 3 was." "No, Maras. We weren't sure it was still active," the overseer replied. "You lied to the Concord. We protected it. By burying an entire species in the dark?" The Korax beside him raised a long arm. "If termination protocol was incomplete, then exposure now could destabilize the entire core alliance. You saw the logs. You saw how the machines responded." Vera turned toward the display on the wall. "Live telemetry from Reyes's biometric suite, now empty." "Where is he?" They looked. No cameras showed movement. No sensors registered location. "He's off-grid." And that was impossible. Unless something had taken him. Back in the vault, Reyes sat now. His legs didn't quite want to support him, not out of weakness. Fatigue. His muscles ached not sharply, but persistently. He hadn't rested in 2 cycles. The medical data had shown elevated stress hormones earlier, and now a strange pressure behind his eyes. The being noticed. "You're beginning to feel it." "What?" "The memory. It's not stored in your brain. It's folded into your genome, like heat-activated dye. When the right signal triggers it, your biology begins to remember what it was." "I'm not changing," he said, voice sharp. "I'm not mutating." "No," the being agreed. "But your memory of what you are is. That process is slow, painful, but irreversible." He leaned forward, pressing his palms to his eyes. Images, flickers, shadows of cities not his own, weapons he couldn't name, a sky split by 3 moons, and the sound of something he couldn't explain. Not noise. Command. The being placed a hand on the table, stabilizing the data prism. "You need rest," it said. "Real rest. Your body needs time to buffer the activation. Sleep will allow the information to settle. And if I don't? Your heart rate will climb, vision will degrade, memory drift will start. You'll confuse what's you and what's legacy. Eventually, your nervous system will try to override the integration. You'll enter neurological rejection, which means seizures, possible respiratory failure." Reyes didn't move for a long time. Then, finally, he lay back against the nearest platform. "Wake me if the galaxy falls apart." The being didn't smile. Instead, it adjusted the room's temperature, lowered the lights, and waited. And as Reyes's breathing slowed, his dreams flickered with ruins that weren't ruins, names that weren't names, and a single phrase echoing softly through a sky he'd never seen. "Termination is not deletion, it is delay." He woke 13 hours later. The room was dim, warm, quiet. His mouth was dry, but the muscle tension had eased. The ache behind his eyes was gone. No fever, no tremor. The being sat nearby, still, silent, watching an old projection flicker in a steady loop founder glyph scrolling down a transparent sheet of archival glass, not translating, rehearsing, as if the memory itself had become a ritual. Reyes sat up slowly. His joints cracked, but it was ordinary stiffness. He reached for the carafe beside him, poured water, drank it slowly. Nothing metallic in the taste. No nausea. "I expected worse," he muttered. "You buffered well," the being said. "Most would have gone into cytokine shock after a memory surge that long. You said I wasn't the first. You're not. You're the first to survive." Reyes rubbed the bridge of his nose. "So what now? You patch me up and send me back upstairs so they can dissect me?" "They won't find you," it said. "The Institute's main systems erased their own backups after the directive reactivated. Your location no longer exists in their network. To them, you're absent. To their AI, you're unsearchable. That's not comforting. It wasn't meant to be, it's fact." He stood fully now, stretching. "Look, I appreciate the shelter, but I'm not going to hide in a basement because a bunch of machines are afraid of my genome." "They're not afraid of your genome," the being said. "They're afraid of what it means." Reyes turned toward the center platform. "Then explain it, one last time, clean." The being stood as well. No ceremony now, no hesitation. In the final days of the Founder era, it said, a project was initiated unsanctioned, undocumented by a minority faction. Their goal wasn't to evolve themselves. It was to diversify the survival blueprint of life itself, to build a species that could react not just to environment, but to extinction, something that didn't merely adapt, but used the attempt to destroy it as fuel. Recursion, Reyes said. Yes, recursive adaptation. Your ancestors weren't chosen, they were designed through forced natural failure. The project created over 2,000 proto-humanoid strands, only one held. Reyes folded his arms. And that was us. Yes. Homo sapiens, you are not synthetic. You are not artificial. You are a closed feedback loop of adaptation. Every failure you survive rewrites you. Every attempt to erase you sharpens the sequence. The founders saw it too late. He exhaled slowly. And they tried to delete it. They called it the termination protocol. But it didn't kill your kind. It scattered you. Your memory was wiped, your genome masked. But in burying you, they preserved you. The being walked to the opposite wall, where an old interface lay behind a cracked, transparent layer. It keyed in a series of unmarked commands. The wall shimmered. A map appeared. Not of the galaxy, of Earth. Not modern Earth, primal, before cities, before agriculture. Fallback sector, Reyes whispered. They left Earth untouched because they assumed time would dilute the sequence. They underestimated its resistance to entropy, and they set your world to ignore in every database. You were marked as noise. And now? The noise came back. Outside the vault, the Institute was unraveling. Since the blackout, 16 AI clusters had initiated partial self-deletion. 3 research divisions refused to reconnect to the central grid. The main archive purged anything tagged with pre-Concord human biology, not by command. By instinct. Vera stood in the command deck with the Council's emergency oversight team. She hadn't slept. Her coat was crumpled, one sleeve torn from a drone's automated restraint she'd elbowed her way out of. No one mentioned it. The latest report scrolled across the screen. Subject, Reyes, Samuel. Status, unknown. Tracking, unavailable. Genome classification, blocked. System, comment, access denied. He's gone, she said flatly. The Corax next to her clicked an internal relay. We can still reach his shuttle logs. If he tries to leave the moon, he won't. The Barthi commander frowned. You're certain? She turned slowly, tired but sure. He's not trying to run, he's processing. If he meant harm, the Institute wouldn't still be standing. That shut the room up. Because deep down, no one could explain why the building still functioned, why he hadn't triggered anything worse. Unless the system was waiting for a decision. Back in the vault, Reyes stood before a final interface, a system panel built into the foundation. The being beside him held a small, palm-sized transducer. This is the Founder relay. It's not connected to the Concord, not connected to the moon. It speaks only to other systems like itself, which are deep memory satellites, shielded caches, genetic seed vaults, places where the Founders stored information they didn't want the living to access. Reyes stared at the device. And, if I use it? You send a signal, not a call for help, a wait command. It tells the old systems, the sequence lives. And what happens then? The being hesitated, then handed the transducer to him. No one knows, because it's never happened before. Reyes turned it over in his hands. The surface wasn't smooth, it was etched with something. He brushed it with his thumb. Glyphs flared briefly in red. Reboot signal ready. He didn't press it. Instead, he looked back at the being. Why, help me? It was quiet for a moment. Then, because I've studied the Terminated Programs all my life, and every record ends the same way. Silence. But you? You are the response. You're the only extinction that remembered itself back into being. Reyes nodded once. Then looked down. Pressed the signal. And the galaxy blinked. Across systems no longer monitored, machines powered up. Old satellites, forgotten since before the first Concorde, turned toward the stars. Long dormant probes launched silently from cratered moons. Seed vaults opened their inner gates, not to release anything, but to listen. Somewhere beneath the ice of a forgotten exoplanet, a biological archive spun up one more sequence, marked in glowing red. Genome restored, class Delta 0. Status, returned. And within hours, hundreds of AIs most disconnected, abandoned, derelict, began receiving a message in founder code. Not a threat. Not a command. Just one line. Program returning. Back on Phaedra 7, the Institute's system stabilized. No more blackouts, no more deletions. In the command room, Vera saw a new log entry appear. It wasn't authorized. It had no user ID. It simply said, "Observation complete. Integration successful. Sequence returned to conquered timeline." She didn't speak. Just sat down slowly, breath caught in her throat. The room around her kept working. People moved. Orders were given. But she knew something had just re-entered the story of the galaxy. And it would not leave again. Reyes stood outside now. The vault had sealed itself behind him. The Institute hadn't sent anyone. He guessed they wouldn't. He looked up at the stars. The same ones his ancestors had stared at before it all broke, before they were erased. He wasn't a weapon. He wasn't an accident. He was a reminder. He smiled, but it wasn't humor. More like acknowledgement. Then turned toward the horizon, where the next shuttle bay shimmered with early light. He had no plans. But the galaxy had questions now, and he was ready to answer them. With memory. With caution. With every failed extinction still written in his bones. Termination incomplete. Sequence reinitiated. Outcome inevitable.